Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, QC MP, Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, Senator, the Honourable Lucille Moore, other members of government, Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commichon, members of the Barrow family, Dr. Janine Coma, Joan Coma-Doyle, Nadia Barrow, Anthony Barrow and Robert O'Neill, permanent secretaries and other government officials, coordinator, Regathering 2020, Mrs. Selma Green, and the project team, members of the St. Lucie Parish Organizing Committee, specially invited guests, members of the media. Good evening, everyone. As I said, I am Patricia Branker, and I have the honor to lead you through the proceedings this afternoon. This event is organized by the Barrow Centenary Committee, led by Senator Lucille Moore, the Regathering Secretariat, led by Mrs. Selma Green, and the St. Lucie Parish Organizing Committee, of which I am a part. This ceremony is but one of several events this year to mark the 100-year anniversary of the birth of national hero and the former Prime Minister, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. These events throughout the year will celebrate the many facets of Barrow, his leadership in Barbados and in the region, his work in Barbados, St. Lucie, and in the parish of St. John, his love of flying, cooking, and building a path forward for this nation. So today's ceremony is so important as it sets the tone for the rest of the year, and I think we should have a round of applause for the committee for the plans for the rest of this year. Speaking of Barrow's work in the region, I want to welcome now the Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commichon. Help me welcome him, please.
Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Ministers of Government, members of the Barrow family, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters all, good evening. It is really an honor to be here this evening to make my little contribution to this unveiling ceremony. Honestly, I do not think that Regathering could have started in a better way. You know, Regathering 2020 is supposed to be a year in which we Barbadians, those of us at home, but also those of us abroad, spend a year really reflecting and seeking to rediscover who we really are as a people and what our core principles are, what is our overarching mission as we go forward into the future. And we could not have found a more fitting Barbadian historical personality to root that reflection in than the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. I am really glad that St. Lucie is beginning to lay claim to its special claim upon not only Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, but upon the entire Barrow O'Neill tradition in Barbadian politics and nation building. This is, you know, we have 10 national heroes and they're all great. It would be invidious of me to say who is greater than another. But certainly, Errol Walton Barrow represents perhaps exemplifies the best in the Barbadian character and personality. But when you examine where did that come from, you can't help but reflect on the fact that he was the nephew of the great Charles Duncan O'Neill. He was the son of Charles Duncan O'Neill's little sister, Ruth Alberta O'Neill Barrow. He was the son of Bishop Reginald Grant Barrow, who married into the O'Neill family, a great St. Lucie family. And he was the little brother of Dame Nita Barrow, our very first female Governor General. And they are all rooted in St. Lucie. Dame Nita, well, the O'Neills, Charles Duncan O'Neill and the whole O'Neill family. This is the headquarters, St. Lucie, of the O'Neill family. Dame Nita was likewise born in St. Lucie. Errol was born just a stone's throw from here. And of course, we have not paid sufficient attention to the father, Bishop Reginald Grant Barrow, who came to St. Lucie to find his wife, but who also made a tremendous mark on St. Lucie as an Anglican priest in this parish. He used the pulpit of the Anglican Church to raise the critical social issues of the day. Indeed, some people will tell you that Bishop Barrow was the real radical in the family. Errol simply followed in his father's footsteps. So, St. Lucie, I want to say to you, very well done. I understand that Mr. Barrow's, the house in which he was born, has really become so dilapidated that it cannot really be saved. But I would like to think that we are going to have an effort, since we can't save the house, but to build a facility here, a facility in which we tell the story of the Barrow O'Neill tradition and contribution to Barbados, in which we tell the story not only of Errol, but also of Dame Nita, of Bishop Reginald Grant Barrow, of Ruth Alberta O'Neill Barrow, and of Charles Duncan O'Neill. And we need, brothers and sisters, every country, every nation needs heroes. We need heroes. Heroes represent the best that we can be. Heroes and heroines are sources of inspiration. Let us use this wonderful Regathering 2020 year. And I really want to praise Prime Minister Mottley for having this wonderful brainchild, to have this year to bring us together as a people, to focus us on what is really important. And let us use this year, St. Lucie, let us use this year to begin to put the foundations in place for that kind of facility that will not only belong to you, the people of St. Lucie, but that you will share with the rest of Barbados as we craft a vision for the future, grounded in the fundamental principles and values of the Barrow O'Neill family. Thank you very much.
We stand here at the garden in St. Lucie, where our Barrow was born in 1920 for good reason. It is here that he started his life with his family and his siblings before his parish gave him to wider Barbados. He would later live in the British Virgin Islands and then in St. Michael. But here is where his navel string is buried. I welcome now Mr. Robert O'Neill, relative of the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, to give his remarks. Please welcome.
Honourable Prime Minister, Ministers of Government, specially invited guests, I'm here merely to say a few words by way of historical context. I am the son of Fitzgerald O'Neill, the first cousin of the Right Excellent Errol Barrow. The garden, previously owned by my grandfather, Joseph Edwin O'Neill. Joseph was the second of 6 siblings, of which Charles Duncan O'Neill was the first. Ruth O'Neill, Errol Barrow's mother, was the 4th. Ruth was born in Nestfield, just east of the St. Lucy's Parish Church. After getting married, Bishop Barrow and Ruth moved to Mount Pleasant, a small property north of Pickens Plantation, and that is now part of Pickens. As was the practice in those days, and we're talking about the 1900s, babies were often delivered at home, not at QEH or the tercentenary. The tercentenary was just being born itself, I think. And Ruth sought the assistance of her sister-in-law, Althea O'Neill, her brother, the wife of her brother Joseph, who lived at the garden at the time. You will note that the garden house is located deep inside the site. In fact, it's just behind that mango tree. So you will understand what Errol Barrow meant when he said he was born in the middle of a cane piece. For the benefit of visitors here, cane piece means sugarcane field. The house is generally a split-level house with a living room and dining on the lower floor, and it had what I call a semi-indoor-outdoor kitchen. Many people would know that in those days the kitchen may have a wood stove inside the house, but it was also a proper wood cooker in the house, but you would also have a wood arrangement outside. So, and most of the houses in those days, the large houses anyway, had a cellar, and that was for agricultural commodities. The Barrows subsequently moved to Crumpton Street, St. Michael, and further afield, as the ambassador mentioned. Uncle Errol, as I call him, had fond connection with St. Lucy and would frequently travel back and link up with his cousin, my aunt Edwina Bowery, and her aunt Jeannie, who lived at the garden at the time for many years. The property is now owned by Edwina's son, Brian Bowery, who lives in the UK. Uncle Errol had a bond with St. Lucy. It was such that he encouraged his siblings and his cousins to invest in Pickens Plantation in the 70s when it came on the market for sale. In his formative years, he would have enjoyed many school holidays in St. Lucy at this place with cousins, often under the wing of his uncle, the Right Excellent Charles Duncan O'Neill, who would have influenced his political thinking from that early age. It is evident Uncle Errol had a special bond for St. Lucy in spite of the leadership of Barbados as a country and responsibility to all parishes and peoples as well, in his worldly sojourn, which he used, if you will, to influence the development of Barbados and the wider Caribbean. I wish, therefore, on behalf of the Barrow O'Neill family, to thank the Prime Minister, the Government of Barbados, as well as the people of St. Lucy for initiating this gracious initiative and laying of this plaque. We are indeed heartened that Mr. Barrow's legacy springs hope eternal. Thank you.
Peter Morgan, in his book, The Life and Times of Errol Barrow, says that Barrow was once a member of the St. Michael Cathedral Choir, but left to focus on his studies. Choir master and organist Gerald Hudson was of the view that he had a pretty good voice as well. So now we appreciate a good voice, a daughter of St. Lucie. Let's welcome, to give us a bit of song, Miss Chanel Branker.
You are. There's an answer if you reach into your soul, and the sorrow that you know will melt away. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on. And you cast your fears aside, and you know you can survive. So when you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. No one reaches out a hand for you to hold. You can find your love if you search within yourself, and the emptiness you felt will disappear. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and you know you can survive. So when you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. Dreams are hard to follow, but don't let anyone take them away. Hold on, there will be tomorrow. In time, you'll find the way, and then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, and you cast your fears aside, and you know you can survive. So when you feel like hope is gone, look inside you and be strong, and you finally see the truth, that a hero lies in you. That a hero lies in you. That a hero lies in you.
We're going to welcome now to the lectern, the Honourable Peter Phillips, MP, Minister in the Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, and our parliamentary representative here in St. Lucie. Let's welcome the Honourable Peter Phillips.
Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, QC, MP, Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, Senator the Honourable Lucille Moore, members of the Cabinet and the parliamentarians, Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commission, Dr. Janine Comer, Nadia Barrow, Robert O'Neill, and members of the O'Neill and Barrow family, permanent secretaries and other government officials, coordinator regathering, Selma Green and the project team, members of the St. Lucie Parish Organizing Committee, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm indeed pleased and humbled to be standing here in the parish of my birth to honor a fellow son of the soil, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, national hero. It is important for me to share with you that before he became the father of independence and of our nation, Errol Barrow was a son of St. Lucie. Indeed, Errol Barrow's roots are deeply entrenched in St. Lucie. His father, Reverend Reginald Barrow, was a curate at the St. Lucie Parish Church. His maternal grandfather, Joseph O'Neill, a blacksmith, used his earnings from his craft to buy this land at the garden in St. Lucie, where Joseph's daughter Ruth and Reginald lived. It is here where our national hero and some of his siblings were born and grew up. And so, we are honored that families in St. Lucie contributed to his formative development and helped mold him into the man that he became. Then we gave him to Barbados and to the world. Today, all of St. Lucie celebrate his achievements. He has certainly furthered the institution of democracy in Barbados and left a proud heritage which we must emulate. We acknowledge that Errol Walton Barrow grew into a giant of a man who made many significant innovations to Barbados's political and social landscape. However, we know that in spite of his grandeur, he was a man of humility who would have been reluctant to have monuments with his name. But as a son of St. Lucie, a son of Barbados, and a self-proclaimed and practicing regionalist, his beginnings cannot go unmarked, especially on this day in 2020, 100 years after his birth. We appreciate that there is no gesture that would befit his legacy, and so the plaque which we are unveiling today is a mere token of our appreciation of his love, of his life, and will mark and rightfully center his birthplace, debunking the notion that he was born in Pickering. I trust that this occasion will also highlight the opportunity to turn this site into a future space of national significance, and I pledge to continue our efforts to have his former home restored. Madam Prime Minister, at this time in our history, as our country innovates and goes through its transformation process and positions itself to meet and exceed its development goals, I hope that in the near future, we can turn our attention to this place and have it restored as a place, a part of our built heritage. Regathering 2020 offers visitors and locals alike the opportunity to see Barbados's attractions through a new lens with a community focus. It affords the chance to create a 52-week calendar to grow our domestic and international tourism products. It provides the prospect to reconnect with our Bajan heritage. Therefore, the proposed investment will go far beyond 2020, and an Errol Barrow Museum here at the Garden would have large cross-cultural appeal and will allow tourists and Barbadians to not only experience the excellent and many facets of Errol Walton Barrow as a statesman, a politician, a lawyer, military man, adventurer, chef, and orator, but also showcase what is iconic and indigenous about St. Lucie. The spin-off benefits of such an attraction would have positive economic impact and social implications for St. Lucie specifically and for Barbados as a whole. In closing, I want to thank you all for joining us here for this very special occasion. I wish to thank the Errol Barrow Centenary Committee, the St. Lucie Parish Organizing Committee, the National Cultural Foundation, the National Conservation Commission, the Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, and the Regathering Project Implementation Unit for working together to make this ceremony and the concert that we will be attending later this afternoon very possible. These are but two of the many national events we'll have this year, and I look forward to seeing you all at the other events across this island as we celebrate Barbados and all things Barbadian. Wishing you a happy Errol Barrow Day. I thank you.
I want to acknowledge at this time the presence of our Attorney General, the Honourable Dale Marshall. Welcome, sir. The Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow led this country at a pivotal time in its history, including its independence from England in 1966. Our main speaker this afternoon, our Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, is a child of that time, as she was but a baby during that time. It is significant that she now leads us into the future as an independent nation. Please welcome to the lectern our Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley.
Thank you very much, distinguished guests all. I can't imagine what it was like to be here on this site 100 years ago. I can't imagine. And I can't imagine because this country has changed so much that we can only but try to create images as to what it looked like at night, at 6 o'clock in the evening on this day 100 years ago. What it looked like in the morning, who would bring the news, who would carry out whatever had to be carried out. I suspect that my use of the word imagine has got your own minds running wild. But I start at this point because it is easier, and in particular for the young ones among us as I look around, it's easy for us to take a lot for granted. And we can't. We can't because we live in a world where so many things are changing that are beyond our control, that the only thing we have control over is who we are and how we behave and what we say and what we build together. And I say these things conscious that we are here to honor a builder of this nation, a man who understood, as I said a few nights ago, that even as he gathered in his own spaces and places, that Barbados came first, and that Barbados, above all else, had to be able to claim its own destiny. He would not have been blind to the fact that this country was the center of the British Empire for centuries, with respect to what it was able to earn for the British Empire and for the families who lived in Britain but who chose to earn their living in this country. He would not have been blind to the fact, he may not have appreciated it as we now do, that on this little rock more records stood surrounding the transatlantic slave trade than any other country other than the United Kingdom, because the British chose to settle here and to develop a whole host of institutions, some of which we still benefit from today and some of which are no longer with us. I start from this point because I want you to imagine the courage that it took when he determined that this country should become the smallest nation on the planet Earth to become independent in 1966. When Nkrumah took the decision to become the first African country in Ghana, sub-Saharan country in Africa, to become independent. Of course, India, Pakistan had gone before. People thought Nkrumah was being courageous and leading that movement. But I want to posit to you that the step to take Barbados in to the unknown as an independent state required a tremendous amount of courage. And we have done well. And we thank him and those who were with him for that courage. But today when we gather here, we have also to reflect on where can courage take us today? And how do we summon, similarly, the courage of men like Buster, of Sarah Ann Gill, of Charles Duncan O'Neill, of Grantley Adams, of Errol Barrow, and all of the other heroes whose courage and sacrifice laid the way along with those with whom they walked, because leaders do not walk alone, to be able to make something out of what was effectively a horror story for people of our background. I believe that in today's world, we face a range of threats, some of which over which we have little or no control, and some of which over which we have control. And whether those threats be as far-flung but as pervasive as the climate crisis that caused this parish of St. Lucie a few months ago to flood in ways that I certainly have never seen in my lifetime, reminding us of the fragility of our ecosystem, reminding us that we too are on the front line of the climate crisis, or whether those threats are peculiar to our nation with respect to a failure on the part of a few, no more than a few, to understand how to resolve conflict without carrying people 6 feet underground. The threats are real, and in each instance require courage on our part. In the instance of the climate crisis, we have to change how we build. We have to change how we eat. We have to change how we do a whole host of things. Not singularly, but collectively. But the one sure thing we know is that if we don't do it collectively with others across this world, that our very existence on earth is threatened. With respect to the domestic issues that destabilize our communities and our families, we have to learn to teach our children how to say no, and how to negotiate their way, and how to be able to stand and to know the difference between right and wrong, because there is no other word for right than right, and there's no other word for wrong than wrong. But that requires having difficult conversations many a time. And in fractured families where persons are seeking popularity as opposed to rooting our children, that can sometimes become an elusive pathway without us realizing that the failure to root our children, to sustain our children, to nurture our children is the exercise not just of a mother or a father, but the exercise of a community. I take heart when I read the story of Errol Walton Barrow and Nita Barrow, that theirs was not an idyllic existence in terms of their family upbringing, but a family nurtured them and raised them. And we in this country have become too accustomed to excuses rather than duty and obligation. And I ask Barbadians today, as we reflect on the celebration of our national hero, the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, to reflect on all aspects of his life and to reflect that his character, more than anything else, determined the path that he would walk and the actions that he would take to shape the nation that he would shape. That many of us have the benefit of far more, but that we choose to focus on what we don't have rather than building upon what we have. And it is against that background that for me, the greatest development of our nation over the course of the last century has come in the expansion of education opportunities which cannot be taken for granted in this country. For we know that education separates us from what might otherwise be circumstances of poverty to great opportunity. And we have been blessed that on this 166 square miles, the values and the message has been more or less universal across generations and across leaders. It is against this background, Peter, I say to you that I know it is easy to build monuments to heroes. And that is one way of expressing our gratitude. But I believe in living our heroes. I believe in doing credit not just to our nation but to them by our living. And I want to share a story as to why I have reached this position, because it is not out of anything other than deep, sober reflection. I have every confidence that this site will become a museum one day. And I have every confidence that the people of Barbados, including the government which I lead, will play its part. But when I was a young child, around the age of 15 or so, I had an uncle who was the chief executive officer of the National Cultural Foundation. And I remember being in his office one evening after school, and some youngsters from St. Andrew calling him and asking if they could have some stage sections and a tent for a function they were going to be doing in St. Andrew. And he said no. And I was taken aback because I knew what was outside in the yard. And he said to them, go by so-and-so who got a shop at the corner there in Hillaby and tell him I send you to borrow 2 lorries, because he got 2 lorries. And there's a man down the road who got some tarpaulin. Tell him Mr. Mottley sent you for the tarpaulin. And he went on with 1 or 2 other things. And when he came off the phone, I asked him, but why? He said, I could easily have given it to them, yes. But I wanted them to understand what it takes, first and foremost, to put on this production. Secondly, to know what it takes to negotiate requests from people that you don't know. And to be able to negotiate that may not always lead to an immediate yes. And then to understand the responsibility of taking care of somebody else's property. And then to understand that they have now a friend in a different generation from the generation to which they belong. And it was a life lesson for me. That sometimes the easiest answer and the easiest road is not the best answer or the best road. I believe that by the people of St. Lucie, being led by your MP and others, civil society, the private sector, and the government working together, that this project, in the same way that Tyrrell Court became one, can become a magnificent point of reference and museum for the people of St. Lucie. And we shall certainly play our part. But I've come here today to speak about how we are going to live our heroes. And we are going to live our heroes by recognizing what they fought for and what they stood for. I spoke earlier of courage. Courage at the very physical level, but courage also within the homes. Courage also to be able to confront difficult situations. Courage to be able to understand the sociology of smallness and how it inhibits us as a nation. Our inability to be able to share what we feel with others without understanding that you have to, and that you can do it without offending. That I can disagree without being disagreeable. And that if we truly want to have sustainable progress, then there has to be truth and sincerity in our communication with each other. That's what courage means in our society today. We have to live it every day if it is going to make a difference. We have to understand that by their living, they also sought to create that platform, building on a tradition, ironically, that was ours to build upon. Because I do not know of many other nations of 166 square miles that had 200 primary schools in the year 1900. More than 6 secondary schools. So that long before the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow was born, or any of the others, there was a healthy tradition to appreciate education in this country, and the extent to which education truly could liberate even more than an Act of Parliament purported to do. Because the Act of Parliament gave the notion of freedom, but not the reality of freedom to our brothers and sisters who lived at that time of emancipation. So that the commitment to build opportunities for every Barbadian girl and boy in education, so that you and your family could go places and dream of things and achieve things that hitherto 100 years ago on this site others may not have realized were possible, is what I mean when I talk about living our heroes. My government, therefore, will, as of next year's Errol Walton Barrow Day, agree to the issuance of 3 scholarships every year on this day. 1, and in the areas associated with Mr. Barrow's interests and life. I'm not trying to replicate what we do at the University of the West Indies. He set the foundation for that, and we reintroduced it 2 years ago. But what I am setting a vision for is for areas that still constitute pockets. Particularly one, that these 3 scholarships will be reserved for people from newer secondary schools in Barbados only. 2, that they will be in the 3 areas of air transport. I'm sure that Mr. Barrow would smile from wherever he is if he knew that this scholarship would produce a pilot or an aeronautical engineer. 2, maritime. He was a lover of the ocean, and his determination that his ashes are there in the Caribbean Sea are forever to remind us of his love for the Caribbean, but also for that the Caribbean Sea forever remain as a zone of peace, a phrase that I have had to use with more regularity in the last 2 years than I ever dreamt I would have to use it. And 3, of course, culinary skills. And I say so because many a day he would call me, particularly when I came back, would come home on vacation, and he would say, tell your mother don't cook tonight. I'll bring in some grouper. I'll bring in some turtle. I'll bring in some this, some that. And his love for cooking and his cookbook privilege done with his friend from Trinidad is well known to all. And I've chosen these 3 areas because I believe that there are 3 areas not covered by the University of the West Indies curriculum for which we have committed to free education for our children. But I've chosen the newer secondary schools because between Grantley Adams and Errol Barrow, they laid the platform for the mass democratization of education in this country. And it is only fitting, therefore, that just as I have spoken today, I shall also speak on April 28th. Suffice it to say that by their living, by our living, by the living of these scholarship winners, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years from now, we will be living our heroes and the example brought to us by our heroes. I believe, therefore, Peter, that call on me to help with whatever you want here. Because this journey is one that matters more than the destination. But as a government, our ability to create opportunity for people for whom opportunity does not now exist yesterday is the greatest legacy that Errol Walton Barrow would want us to give to the people of this nation. And hence my government so commits today to living that legacy. I'd like to thank Ambassador Comijong too for producing this booklet, which should be compulsory reading for all Barbadians, not just young Barbadians. And I do so because very often we can get lost in the cobweb of xenophobia. And this country, like others, has known what it is sometimes for that to have happened. But you and I both know that in the same way Bishop Barrow had to find exile because of his revolutionary tongue from the pulpit, there are others who have had to find solace here. And I can think of many Caribbean brothers and sisters for whom Barbados became a refuge in times of great need and in times of great stress. And this was the vision that all of our leaders mercifully have had for us. That Mr. Barrow was at the center of the establishment of Carifta in the year of my birth gives me great pleasure. That he was at the center of the establishment of the Caribbean community, which I now have the great honor of chairing, gives me great pleasure. That Mr. Barrow was at the center of the courageous decisions to stand tall and to recognize Fidel Castro and the people of Cuba at a time when others would have doomed that decision and deemed that decision to be one not only of folly, but one of grave danger for one of the smallest independent nations of the world in the backyard of one of the largest superpowers of the world. I end where I started. Courage is required of us in almost all that we do. And I ask the people of this nation to be of strong heart. You know, in the words of Timothy, it is said that the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of courage, of sound mind, of love. And I can think of no better phrase to encapsulate what his life stood for and what many of our lives stand for along the way and today. And if we do nothing else than to, by our living, give credit to our nation, then I know we shall be the firm craftsmen of our faith that both he and Irvin Burgee settled was entirely possible, and that we also will bear the messages when the ants and the fish come 100 years from now to tell us that that little nation is still waving its flag high, that that little nation is still born of the same and reflective of the same values that has caused it to be safe along the way. And that in so doing, we know that we too have run our leg of the relay race and have kept intact the baton which must be passed to the young girls and boys who stand here with us, conscious that it is not ours to achieve perfection, but it is ours always to advance the cause. God bless Barbados, and God bless. And God bless the Barrow family. And I want to say before I sit, Nadia in particular, that for you and your sisters and your children, all collectively, yours is a proud legacy. I am aware you do not live in Barbados, but I want you to know that regardless of where you live, this is a country that has produced global citizens with Barbadian roots, and we expect you and yours to be no different. Thank you, and God bless.
We want to thank the unveiling party for the unveiling of the plaque. And the question was asked, what is meant by newer secondary schools? That means simply any school which was established after 1951. Those persons who asked that question. I now welcome to the lectern Mr. Danny Babb, Chairperson of the Parish Organizing Committee for St. Lucie, to give the vote of thanks. Welcome, Mr. Babb.
Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, Senator the Honourable Lucille Moore, other members of government, Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commichon, the Barrow family, permanent secretaries and other government officials, Coordinator, Regathering 2020, Selma Green, and the project team, members of the St. Lucie Parish Organising Committee, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It falls to me to give the vote of thanks, which will be relatively brief, but I want to ensure we acknowledge all the hard work that it took to make today a success. As said earlier, this event was organized by the Barrow Centenary Committee, led by Senator Lucille Moore, the Regathering Secretariat, led by Selma Green, and by the St. Lucie Parish Organising Committee, of which I am the chairperson. We want to thank Senator Moore, Ms. Green, and all their staff for their hard work today and for those future events. I want to thank everyone who is working on the Parish Organising Committee for organising this event and the 30+ events held in St. Lucie in the month of January. I also want to thank the workers who cleared the area, provided support with parking, and erecting the monument, namely the management and staff of the Ministry of Transport, Work and Maintenance, the National Conservation Commission, the National Cultural Foundation. We want to thank you for bringing and placing this monument. The MC said earlier that lovely was how Chanel presented, and I want to add my support to that adjective. The region continues to remember Errol Barrow, and so we thank Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commichon. We want to thank Robert O'Neill and the family of Errol Barrow for bringing context to his life and his roots. Thank you all for joining us today. We thank Peter Phillips, the Honourable Peter Phillips, MP, Minister in the Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, and Parliamentary Representative for St. Lucie, for reminding us of the significance of this spot and St. Lucie in the formative time for the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. We thank Prime Minister Mia Amor Mottley for laying out the significance of today and for her words, which I must agree with the Master of Ceremonies gives us much to consider. We also thank the members of the media, the technical team which supported us with sound, the members of the Royal Barbados Police Force who continue to serve this parish and the country well. Finally, I wish to thank all of you for your support this evening, and I look forward to seeing most, if not all of you, momentarily at the Checker Hall playing field for the concert. Have a good evening.